Join us on a captivating journey as we explore the charm, history, and vibrant culture of Wilkes County. Discover the hidden gems, inspiring stories, and remarkable people that make Wilkes a place worth knowing and celebrating. Join us now and experience the unique essence of life in Wilkes.
Ken Welborn, welcome.
It's good to be here, sir. Good to be here.
Well, it's awfully good to see you. I'm never doubtful that a great story is going to come out of your mouth.
Well, as my buddy Carl White said, it's never a bad time for a good story.
Oh, that's true. That's so true. I have to tell you as we get started. So yesterday, R.G. Absher was in, and we had our visit, and I asked him if he could do some music. And, you know, R.G. is a great musician as well as a great historic interpreter, an outdoors guy, river guy, all of those things. And he brought his guitar, and the guitar, what was the connection? Tell me, the guitar?
It was a Doc Watson signature.
A Doc Watson signature guitar of some sort, but also his banjo. So he had them both set up on their stands. The banjo was there on that side of you, and the guitar was on that side. And we're talking. We're just having our conversation. No music going on at this time. We're having a great conversation about the great outdoors and, you know, his history in Wilkes County. And I started hearing this ringing noise. I mean, it was like I don't know if you've ever had a ringing in your ear, right? But literally that's what I was sensing. I was, what in the world is that? I didn't want to stop the interview, what we're doing, having a great conversation. And finally it dawned on me what was going on. You know what it was?
No idea.
It was the resonance of our voice in that banjo. So the banjo was it was a tone that was coming out of it just from our conversation. And it took me a minute because I thought something was going on with my head. That was like, what the world's happening? But he sat right there, and it was great. And I know you were friends with R.G. Absher as well.
R.G. is a fine guy, and he's a great musician. And you know, all good musicians need somebody like me to listen to them. And I have the musical talent of a bag of cut hair.
Cut hair. Right.
I'm always I'm in the audience. So and he is truly an amazing musician.
Yeah, we agree on that one. Well, for those who don't know Ken Welborn, I don't know if there is anyone who don't know you, but if they don't, tell people what you do.
Well, I work for the Wilkes Record in North Wilkesboro. My office is easy to find. It's at 911 Main Street, and it's an interesting place to come. I always tell folks if they go anywhere that they have a better time than there, then somebody was really, really glad to see them. Me and my little dog Angel, we greet our company, and that's the best part of our day every day. It's kind of a poor man's museum. It's hard to describe, but there's something for everybody at the Wilkes Record, and it costs you a cent to come by.
You know, one of the things about that story and your place is there is a lot of stuff there. That might be an understatement. I mean, on the main floor, the basement, and the upstairs where you live. But one of the things that I've heard from more people is that they've gone into your shop to buy something. They think it's a retail store. But you've got all these things that obviously would either be in a museum or an antique shop, and none of it's for sale, right?
That's correct. And among the things that are there, people ask me all the time, what's the best thing there? And I say, well, my mama's baby boy. What? Who else? And they say, well, besides you and the dog, what's the best thing there? And I always tell them, I have the neatest stick since the one Moses tossed down in front of Pharaoh. So you can come and see it and find out if that's true or not.
Oh, my gosh. I remember that story. That was the first time we did story time together on Life in the Carolinas. It was, oh, my gosh, how many years has that been? 7, 8, 9 years?
More like 10.
10 years. Oh, my goodness. 10 years ago, that was the first time on camera, and you did a fantastic job, but so many times afterwards you've told me of how nerve-wracking that was for you.
Well, I've said many times that speaking to a crowd of people, you can tell if they're with you or not.
Right.
Speaking to one guy down on one knee with a great big glass eye looking at you, it was somewhat disquieting for me.
Right.
And I have learned, I've got great faith in editors now, so I don't worry about it like I used to. But I thought I was a total bust on that. And when I saw the show and it got through, I thought, well, gee, I did great.
You didn't miss a beat, did you?
No, yeah.
Yeah, that's you're exactly right. The editors, those are like the wizards behind the curtain, of making the magic happen. So, a long time. That's 10 years. Wow, that's amazing. I remember you telling that story on camera. We didn't know any of your stories. Had no idea what your stories were. And I think Jared was there as a PA then, and he was actually on camera for a minute, and you had him look through the stick, and then you told the story.
I did, yeah.
And then there was another one. We can't give your stories away, but there was one from the state penitentiary story.
Oh, my goodness, yes. I have the control panel from Old Sparky, the electric chair in Raleigh. It's what collectors love better than anything. It's a one-of-a-kinder.
Yeah,
There's no more like it.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. Do you mind telling people about it?
Well, if they'll come in, I'll go through it with them anytime. So I don't know how I'd do about it today, but it is worth your trip to town to come by, and there's something for everybody, even a 39-star flag.
Yeah, that's
lots of history, lots of things, and you'd be surprised how much people enjoy in hearing about the history of things they've got, and either they're mighty polite to me, one of the two.
I think maybe that's the lead into our conversation. It's stories and how powerful stories are to excite the imagination, to not only think of things that may or may not have been, but really that story of history. You told a story that I've always liked, and it was about you as a young guy, and you were a newspaper boy. Mm-hmm. And you made an accident one day, right? Mm-hmm. You hit a window.
You want to hear that story?
I do.
Well,
everybody does, right?
When, occasionally somebody runs out of somebody to do their program for them. They'll call me to come tell stories for them. And I always like to tell this story. When I was 11 years old, in 1960, I got a paper out delivering the Greensboro Daily News. And I was an independent businessman of sorts because I delivered those papers 7 days a week to 78 customers, made friends I had the rest of my life, folks who were good to me as a little boy, people like Carl Steele and Lawyer Whicker, all those folks that a lot of older people will remember around here. But it worked out pretty good for me every week. My 78 customers, if I collected all of it, would pay me 45 cents a week for the paper. And on Monday morning, I'd get a bill for about $21 or $2. And I usually had about $5 or sometimes $6 left over.
Okay.
Well, in 1960, a kid walking around with $5 in his pocket was pretty well healed because, go to the movie for a dime. Mm-hmm. Cokes were still a dime. You could buy a candy bar for a nickel that was big enough to pass around to your buddies. It was just a different world. Haircuts were a quarter. But anyway, from that day to this one, I never, ever cost my father another dime for anything, period, with the exception of what food I ate at his table. And now and then I bought the groceries. That's something I used to be unhappy about, but I'm kind of proud of these days.
Right.
But anyway, the point of this story is it's good that the kid had the job, and it's also a life lesson. I broke a window in a lady's house called Miss Mary Finley. I threw the paper. She had a big porch. It was easy to hit the porch. In those days, you got it on the porch. You didn't leave it in the yard or the street. And so I hit the window and it broke it. And when I got home that day, I said to my father, "What do I do?" He said, "Well, you broke a window, son. It's just a little piece of glass. It won't cost much. Go tell her this after school today to get it fixed, and you'll pay to fix it." Mm-hmm. And so that afternoon I went. Well, Miss Finley was not a very demonstrative person. She was tall and stately and thin, had white hair, didn't smile much, always had her arms folded, always in a black dress, upstairs on the second floor at Spain hours, and the ladies ready to wear. Well, I went in there, and I said, "Miss Finley, I guess you know I broke your window this morning." She didn't say a word. And I said, "If you'll get it fixed, I'll come by Saturday when I collect my papers and pay you for it." She said, "Fine." No, real proud of you to come by. No, she said, fine. But anyway, so that Friday and Saturday, I was really paying close attention to my stuff, no stopping and visiting. I had to collect my money to pay this bill I got. Again, my father had convinced me it wasn't going to be much of anything. So I went over there, and I walked in there, and honest to goodness, somehow or another, she looked a little less happy, a little more stern, a little taller. I don't know, and there I walked in there, and the counter actually hit me all about the chin, just about. It was about as tall as I was. And I said, Miss Finley, I came by to pay for that window. And she said, fine. And she pulls out this big black pocketbook from under the desk and pulled out a half sheet of paper. And live out to be 100, I will never forget that. She slid that little piece of paper up under my chin and nose, and I read it. And it said, John V. Barger Construction Company, 2 men, glaze-in window at Finley House, $22.50. I was completely devastated. I had no idea it would be anything like that. I couldn't talk. I was afraid to talk.
Right.
I was afraid to start crying. And you don't cry in front of a woman. If anything I learned on Henshaw Street was the code of the great unwashed. You don't cry in front of a girl. And I could feel my lower lip pulling on me. Everything about it was just falling apart. And I just looked at it. I looked up at her, and she stood there, those arms folded, looking down at me. And I started counting my money out on the counter. In no time, I was out of what we call folding money. I was stacking up quarters. I was down to stacking up dimes. And I finally got that $22.50 on that counter. I couldn't look up. I was afraid if I looked up at her, I'd start crying. And finally, after what seemed like an eternity, she said, fine. And then she pushed all my money back to me and said, if you willing to fix that window, so am I.
Wow.
And I've got to tell you, I learned an amazing lesson in kindness, and never, ever have I judged a book by its cover since. And from that day forward, I laid her paper on her porch under the edge of her mat and referred to her as the angel on the second floor at Spanhauer's.
What a great story. So, Ken, after that happened, which that's an incredible story, did you continue interacting? You delivered the paper, of course, but was there a friendship that developed? Or
I never got a whole lot out of her, but I also knew what a wonderful person she was, and I was a whole lot more friendly to her about things. And one of the things I am proud of, as long as that lady lived, I sent her a birthday card and a Christmas card every year, long after I didn't deliver her a paper.
Right.
I have to confess that was my mother's idea, but it was a good one.
She didn't steer you wrong, did she?
No, never.
Let me ask you this. One of the things I really like about your stories, Ken, is not only are they entertaining, so I've never questioned whether it was true or not. I haven't really cared because it was entertaining. So I thought, oh, that's great storytelling. But I've come to know over the years that a lot of these stories not only are good stories, but they're true. They're real people. They were really here. So when you talk about the stories, you're not just giving us this fanciful tale that we can close our eyes and imagine because your words bring it to life. But these are about real people. It's about the history of Wilkes County, about the history of this area that you live in, isn't it?
Oh, and if you mention Miss Mary Finley to a group of older women, of very very old at all, they'll start nodding at you. I'll see them, and when I speak to a group now and then, I'll mention Miss Mary Finley, and they'll nod their head. Or I'll mention Mr. Carl W. Steele, and they'll nod. They all remember Carl W. He was a wonderful old man. I delivered him the Greensboro Daily News. From the day I started delivering that paper, it was like I had another grandfather. And I never knew my grandparents. It was nice when old people were kind to me because my grandparents, I was the baby, and my dad was the oldest, and my grandma and grandpa, and they lived away. I just never knew who they were hardly. But Mr. Steele, he was a watchmaker. He had a place there on Main Street, Steele's Jewelry. He started out, though, at a table at Brame Drug Store. Rented a table and sat there and fixed watches and clocks during the day while the store was open till he made enough money to open his own store, you know. And he had he would work on watches and clocks when I'd go see him to get my money, and you had to go up 2 or 3 steps to this little landing where he sat and worked. Had these funky things on his glasses, all these extra lenses to magnify things, And I even have one because I can't see very well anymore. I've got a pair of those on my I can put on my glasses so I can read the dates on coins and stuff.
Right.
I call them my Carl W's.
I love that.
But Mr. Steele was just one of those people, and the beauty of it really. There's no question at all about what a special kid I think I was. But these folks, I have a feeling, were kind to a whole lot more people than just me.
Sure.
They were just good people. And whenever I mention people like Mr. Steele, they'll always smile if they knew him. They always will.
Do you ever think about the significance of these stories as it relates to history? I mean, we've just talked about a couple of businesses now in this conversation, and there are many more, right? There are many more.
Oh, yeah.
So, in the late of the night or whenever it is that you find your quiet time and you reflect and think back on history, Are these old stories? Are they like old friends?
And that's the beauty of my place too. As I walk through there, or if somebody comes to visit, something would jog me to talk or tell a story that I might not have thought of for 15 years. Right straight across the street, there's a guy got an old trading card and sports memorabilia shop now, but years ago it used to be Carlton's hardware store. And that was the quintessential old hardware store. A man and his wife ran it, her always in a cotton dress, never in pants. And it was just, you walked in there, it was just completely dark. They had the counter right there at the front, and whatever you wanted, he'd go get it for you. Everything from cut nails to horse collars he had in that store. And again, he was my customer. That's how I met him. I'd go there to collect my money. And I've been in there and watched somebody, he'd be waiting on a customer and somebody would want something. He'd go back through the store and there was a series of strings hanging out of the ceiling. And old Mr. Carlton would cut one light off as he cut another light on. It looked like a strobe going off back through there. But he wasn't. And we used to say, the Lord said, let there be light. But Hill Carlton said, not over 30 watts at a time.
So he really was conscious of what it was going to, what it was
He knew
costing.
exactly what he was doing. He wasn't wasting any electricity.
Right.
But power bill get pretty big. But it was so funny. It looked like flash bulbs going off almost on the ceiling.
Wow. So was that something that people talked about?
I don't know. I just noticed it as a kid. And there again, though, these were two very kind people.
Right.
And their children lived away, and apparently when they got old, and they sold that store out. And but as circumstance would have it, a lot of stuff in that building ended up upstairs in it, and they had rented it. And at one time, they rented it to Johnny Roselli for his Italian restaurant for a number of years. And Johnny was and is my buddy, and he let me in the attic up there.
Oh, wow.
And that was like putting Brer Rabbit in a briar patch. And I got some really neat stuff.
Right.
And I knew exactly who it came from. It all had history with me, with Mr. Carlton. It's an old Sherwin-Williams sign here and there and stuff like that. But that's what he sold, And so I was lucky enough to get to continue my relationship with Mr. Carlton long after he and she were both dead,
Wow. So you have those in your shop now?
I do have them, yes. Yeah. And that's another reason I don't want to sell anything, is each piece has its own little piece of history. And as I kid my daughter, she tells folks, don't you worry, when he's gone, we'll have us a yard sale.
Wow. I love the sense of connection. A lot of people go through life and they don't have the benefit of how that makes you feel. When you think about life, can you imagine life without your stuff?
Well, it's a big part of it. It really is,
Right.
and it just sort of has turned into a poor man's museum,
Sure.
and it goes on and on and on, and I still hunt stuff sort of, but most of the time it just comes through the door now.
Sure.
It's a little town; people know what to do. But the effect on my life is amazing from that paper route. One of my customers was a man named E.T. Hack Hackney. Ran a little place called Hackney's Department Store, mostly men's clothing and stuff like that. And my poor daddy, how much as I loved him, as good as he was, he never made any money. It was always, no, son, I don't have the money. I found out once you got a little money in your pocket, you don't have to ask near as many questions of anybody.
Sure.
But Mr. Hackney, again, was one of my buddies. I delivered him the Greensboro Daily News. I put it right on his porch every day. If I missed his porch, I got off my bicycle and went and put it on his porch. And I made a deal with him, and I bought me a pair of new shoes from him. And he opened me an account, 11 years old, or 12 maybe. And he would mark 45 cents a week off that pair of shoes till I got it paid for. Then he let me have a couple of shirts. And he marked 45 cents a week. We traded out my school clothes.
Right.
And so I opened up a little, and things like that. I don't know if a kid would have any opportunity to do something like that now. But
Sure.
it is a shame among all the reasons for newspapers no longer being what they used to be. I mean, I no longer have a newspaper as such. We do the Wilkes Record completely electronically. But it's doing much better for me. We went from printing old news once a week to printing the news every day, and it's just made a difference that you can't imagine. But that paper route taught me so many things. But most especially, if I had to pick one, it'd be Miss Mary Finley. It's the lady who taught me a lesson in kindness that I will never forget.
Yeah, well, I love that story. I mean, I've heard it several times, and it never gets old.
There are radio stations that make a fortune running nothing but oldies 24 hours a day. A good story is always a good story.
Never a bad time for a good story, is it?
Somebody said that.
Someone asked me, said, I don't know, I was speaking for a ladies' garden club down in South Carolina, and I got up and said that, and afterwards this lady come up and said, is that your line or is that someone else's line that you just copied? And I was like, I don't really know. I know it just came to me one day and I said it, and I've said it ever since, but wherever it came from, it's a great line.
Yeah.
Because there's so many disturbing things for people to talk about. I just want to hear something good. Just tell me a good story. It makes us smile. It makes us feel good.
There's a lot of older people around here. I remember an old attorney named Max Faree that was around here.
Right.
He was quite the character. He came here in 1957. I was about 8 years old at the time. I knew his children from school. But I wrote a column one time for the newspaper, and I said, I got this story from Max Faree, a local attorney. And I said, truth is, I've been stealing his stories for years and years and years. And about 2 weeks later, I got a pack in the mail addressed to Mr. Kenneth Philip Welborn, Esquire. And it had my address on it. Opened up and it said, Dear Mr. Welborn, if you're going to steal my stories, get them right. And he had a bunch of stories he'd written down through the years, and it's beautiful stuff. And it made me feel good about writing my stuff down.
Sure.
And at least in Max's case, I do acknowledge the theft.
Yeah, that's right. That's a great story. I told you this would go by quick, and it has. But before we wrap today, and we're going to visit again over the next several months, several times, but there's a story that we did together. We had we've done some TV together. And there's one story that I remember that involved a gentleman who let us borrow a car for one of our shows. Is the collector show that we did. On this episode of Life in the Carolinas, I'm a man with a mission. I've got to find something special for a special friend. And I thought, who better to join me than my buddy and infamous collector himself, Ken Welborn.
Morning, Carl.
Morning, Ken. How you doing?
Real good. I hope you are.
I'm doing great. I know this is a little early for us to get together, but are you ready?
Would 5 pounds of flour make a big biscuit? I was born ready. Let's go.
I think it would. Come on.
How about this car?
Oh, Ken, you did a great job on this. This was fantastic.
Well, my friend Rex Brown, Mountain Raven Falls, has this beautiful 46 Chevrolet made available to us, and we're going to have a great day in it.
Oh, I'm looking forward to it. Let's take off. Our mission begins right now. And we traveled around. And if you wouldn't mind, tell that story of how the car ended up being in the show And the reason I wanted to wrap with this one, just kind of in memory of him, because his son came up to me not long ago. Can't remember, some event here in town, and he come up and says, that was my dad, and we talked about that for a moment, and he said it was that made him smile, seeing his car on TV. But tell that story.
That gentleman's name was Rex Brown.
Right.
And Rex Brown ran a ditching service out in Moravian Falls for a number of years. One of the most decent human beings in the world. But the first thing I'll tell you about him is I never met him in my life. I've never needed a ditch. The plumber needs a ditch, or the contractor needs a ditch, and they had these machines called ditch witches. And they would drag them out.
Right.
And that's what he did for a living, and did very well at it. And some 2 or 3 wives ago, I had a Ford Aerostar van somewhere along in there. That would date the time of it. And one morning I came home. One morning I came outside to go in my to my van or to pick up my paper or what, I don't know. But anyway, I looked, and there one whole front door and the whole quarter panel at the front tore all to pieces on my van.
Somebody hit it?
Yeah. And I just gotten in on my side and driven home. I didn't know it.
Right.
Well, it made me so mad I couldn't see straight. I could not believe that. And I looked, and crammed in the hole where there used to be a mirror was this piece of cardstock. And I pulled it out, and it said, "My name is Rex Brown. I have hit your van. I am so sorry. I can't wait any longer. Here's my phone number. Call me. Get it fixed. I'll pay any damages I need to pay. Thank you for your understanding." And signed Rex Brown to it. That's how I met the man.
Wow.
That's the kind of fella he was. I would have never had a clue who did that to my car if it hadn't been for him. And as the years went by, we became dear, dear friends. He did me uncounted courtesies. When we built our park for Chicken Fest, we had all kinds of pipes to be laid and cables to be laid and all that. He did all that work for me and never take a penny. He said, "You putting on events for people? I'll help you put them on. This won't cost you anything." Nice. He was just a wonderful, wonderful man. And when you and I were talking about needing a car to go on that trip, where we went to Pilot Mountain and then to Salisbury,
That's right.
and met such characters as Clyde Overcash down on Bank Street in Salisbury.
Clyde, right?
Yeah, Clyde. He changed his name to Clyde legally. So,
right.
But anyway, I told you, I said, let me call my buddy Rex.
That's right.
And he loaned us a 46 Chevrolet to look at. Looked like a 46 Chevrolet. But underneath it, we could have driven that thing to California. So it was ideal for what we were doing.
That's right.
Which is so we had something dependable. But on top of that, not only did he not charge you anything to use it, he left that morning early with us, stayed with us. We were there we worked from 7 o'clock in the morning to after close to midnight anyway.
That's
that
right.
night. I remember
it was
that.
a long day.
And he stayed with us the whole way.
Right.
And almost wouldn't let you put any gas back in.
Right.
He wanted to pay for that,
Right.
But he was just a decent guy, and he's the kind of person that you run into around here a lot. These people will take their coat off and put on a cold stranger. They just will. All these things boil down to the fact that most everybody is looking for the good in other people, I think, around here. And I think that's a very, very positive thing.
I think that's the spirit of the community, isn't it?
I really believe it is. And I tell people when they say they're thinking about moving here, and I get a lot of company, of course, thinking it's an antique store, and once they get over that, we don't sell anything. We have some amazing conversations. And one time a man and his wife were on a motorcycle, and they came in. And Bob Blake and his wife, Bonna, not Bonnie, but Bonna.
Right.
And anyway, they came in, and I gave them the $2 to him, took them upstairs. My apartment's kind of like a museum, too. I've got a 75-year-old stove and refrigerator we use every day. But anyway, then about, I guess, close to a year later, I saw this guy and his wife again. And they'd bought a 90-acre farm on top of Kilby Gap up there on the way to Taylorsville in Wilkes. And he said, just because everybody we met was just like you, as though they'd just never seen, we weren't a stranger to anybody here. And they stayed here as long as he lived.
And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And that's real. It's a very real thing. Well, Ken, I love our visits. They're always enriching. I always smile inside and outside. It makes me feel good to spend time with you. And I know everybody's going to feel exactly the same way. When I say we haven't even touched the surface, I guess that we've touched it, but we haven't pierced the surface as far as stories are concerned, and stories about the richness of this community. So let's pick up on our next visit, which will be a few weeks from now, and we'll continue sharing some stories about Wilkes, and we'll kind of let's maybe take a look at the stories about the theaters and some of the old restaurants that were in the area. I think down on the street near where we are, there's stories about restaurants that are rather colorful.
If the walls of those buildings could talk, the divorce lawyers would be very happy.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, folks, well, that's this episode of Life in Wilkes. Ken, thank you so much, friend, and we'll see you soon, everybody.
Thank you for spending time with us on Life in Wilkes. We value you as a viewer and appreciate when you share the show with your friends and family. Be sure to bookmark our channel and join us again on the next episode of Life in Wilkes.